Welcome to Your Path to Nonprofit Leadership, the weekly podcast that features the very best in leadership development in the nonprofit sector. I'm your host, Patton McDowell, and committed to bringing you ideas and resources that will build your professional development plan. Thanks for listening. If you're a current nonprofit leader or hope to be one, you're in the right place. I'm glad to bring you these weekly conversations with nonprofit leaders who are really on the cutting edge of our sector. And if you would, do me a favor, share this episode with one other person so that we can continue to build a global community focused on nonprofit leadership. Well, you're in for another fantastic conversation in this episode. It was with Chris Jackson, who brings great leadership experience as he heads Goodwill Industries of the Southern Piedmont, one of the largest nonprofits in the Southeastern United States, running 26 retail stores and employing more than 900 people. And Chris's commitment to his organization and all of the communities he serves is really evident. And what makes this conversation so powerful is the real commitment and personal conviction Chris brings to his leadership, and how thoughtful he's been over the course of his journey from corporate America into nonprofit leadership. In fact, we talk about what he brought from his experience in the for-profit sector and why he made the jump to nonprofit. And of course, some really powerful leadership strategies he's employed, including staff and board development, how he's built a dynamic organizational culture, and most of all, how he has deployed a strategic vision for Goodwill. All this and much more. So don't forget to check out the show notes for this episode. It's number 111. Just go to the podcast or the news page at pattonmcdowell.com, and you'll find all of the resources mentioned, as well as more information on Chris and the great work he's doing at Goodwill Industries of the Southern Piedmont. Speaking of resources, while you're on our website, make sure you connect with us. Get on our email list so you can get free weekly resources, podcast episodes just like this one, and much more. Perhaps something that we can do to help you build that strategic plan for your nonprofit, maybe re-engage your board of directors, or maybe I can help you determine the next step toward your nonprofit leadership through a coaching, training, or one of our unique mastermind programs. Without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Chris Jackson. Chris, thank you for joining me on the path.
Oh, so good to be with you today.
Well, I'm excited about this conversation, Chris. You've had a fantastic leadership journey in the nonprofit sector. Of course, you're doing great work through Goodwill, but I'm also eager to kind of unpack those different stops along the way, what you've learned, and in particular, what will benefit our listener who's thinking about or already on the path to nonprofit leadership. Of all the great things you've done, Chris, is there something you're particularly proud of that maybe a listener could latch on and say, wow, that's something I want to aspire to do as well?
That is a great first question. And I would say it's really the work we've done here at Goodwill the last few years around purpose and culture. We really needed to make a shift to focus more on long-term, relational type services. And what folks were telling us was most important was prosperity. And so we really just latched onto that. And the last 4 years, it's really been the rallying cry for this organization. And it's really to help people see possibilities, seize opportunities, and prosper. And that idea of prosperity has forced us to really and provide the opportunity for us to look at everything we do. And it's to me, it's been just really phenomenal.
Love that. And we'll unpack that prosperity because you've been such a champion for prosperity for everyone. And of course, that embodies what Goodwill is all about. And I know that will lead to our kind of headline question and the topic of this episode, how you develop the strategic vision that led to prosperity for all that you serve, both internal and external, the organization. Before, however, we get to that, Chris, I got to ask you the question. You are a very busy man, a complex, large organization. For all of our listeners out there, how do you stay organized?
Oh, another great question. What I will tell you the thing that I have found for me to be the most helpful, which is I've got to schedule everything. I frankly live and die by the calendar, and I now block time for reflection time,
Nice.
frankly, particularly in a COVID environment. But I'll continue this, which is time to just get up and walk around. Time to just time to think, and kind of back to the reflection piece. So anyway, long story of that is it's the calendar for me.
Right.
I also, part of that is having reminders. So my brain has some, it's cluttered with so much information. If I set a reminder for something, I don't have to worry about that something anymore until the reminder comes up. So that's
Right.
my primary way for staying organized.
Was the pandemic, I guess, did reflection really become a thing for you personally, like all of us? Or was that among the things that maybe changed in your routine that you're now carrying forward?
Yeah, I think I always knew the importance of it, but the COVID environment really forced me to think like, how can I make sure that I actually have that time? With Zoom calls, back to back and what have you. So it's one of those things. There's a few things I have that are lessons learned as a response to a result of COVID. That's one of them that I'm gonna do my best to maintain that. It's been really important and helpful.
Yeah, I appreciate your point too of being proactive with your calendar. And I think so many nonprofit leaders sometimes become only a reactor to their calendar, and you're being thoughtful and proactive to stay ahead of this, which is commendable for sure. All right, let's go back to the Chris Jackson journey. You're in corporate America. Tell me about that moment, or maybe extended moments when you're like, nonprofit might be on my path. What caused you to make the jump?
Well, it's probably it was an extended process for me, to be honest with you. I spent almost 20 years in a large financial services firm. And for the last 5 of those years, probably, have been really reflecting on, what is it that I wanted to do? What was I most connected to?
All right.
And I was a late bloomer. My life experience had me making some decisions that probably should have taken me down a very different path. And one of the things I had experienced at this firm was seeing how much they appreciated and valued people and didn't place a judgment, on me and my background.
Right.
And so I really just felt this really strong connection to do something that was more community based, but that allowed me to take those lessons that I learned and that the power that I felt of being supported. And I had no idea what that was going to look like. But something, came across my desk that just really connected with me very strongly. And I decided to go ahead and make that leap. And then that's how I wound up at United Way, which was my first nonprofit opportunity.
That's fantastic. And again, to talk about, 20 years on one path, but it's never too late. Obviously, you're a great example of finding that calling, I suppose, whenever it happens. I am curious, Chris, because I know you have these conversations as I do with the transition from for-profit to nonprofit. What things did you take from those 20 years that helped you in nonprofit, or what things did you have to kind of relearn when you made the jump to United Way?
A great question. I think the things that I took that were foundational, one was, again, I was a leader, had been in leadership roles for a good while, and that real focus on the power of people, and focusing on, regardless of what role I was in, on relationships and trust and communication and people just in general. So that was a foundational element that really helped me. On the kind of more process side, I think the things that I learned about data and how to use data to help really drive meaningful decisions was another.
Right.
A third might be, and I call it process excellence, which is, being able to look at everything that you're doing through a critical eye, with a critical eye, and have a process to make shifts that make help us be better. So those would be maybe the top three.
I love that, and obviously you've applied that, and I know it continues to impact your strategic leadership at Goodwill. I wonder, Chris, because I know, again, you have conversations, perhaps even entertaining hiring people coming from for-profit to nonprofit. I wonder sometimes there is the grass is always greener syndrome. They're sick of corporate America and whatever that looks like. But how do you differentiate, I guess, someone like that versus someone who has the genuine calling, I guess is for lack of a better word, like you did? Have you had to evaluate that in the hiring process maybe, or just in counseling someone?
I sure have. And, I'm tried to be as clear and, honest as I can. There are many assumptions about moving into nonprofit. I have always heard, folks who have finished out a corporate career, ready to do something different, and they have the assumption that they're going to come work in nonprofit, and maybe this is their pre-retirement
right,
role,
right.
and they're going to work a little less, and I tell them, like, look, you really got to make sure that you're connected to the purpose of the organization and why you want to make this move. Because if you think you're going to work any less, you're mistaken. You're going to work as hard or harder than you ever had. So many of our nonprofits, resources are a challenge.
Right.
And so what you might have been used to in terms of responsiveness or capability or capacity, let me say capacity, in your corporate role, you may or may not have in your nonprofit role. And then the last thing I talk about is that, the tax designation is nonprofit, but these are all businesses, right? Different size businesses. Some are small businesses, some are mid, some are large size. The things that are required to operate that business are the same as if you're a for-profit tax designated organization.
So well put. And I'm glad you lift that up, because again, I don't mind the well-intentioned desire to get into nonprofit work, but you're right, Chris, if they're coming in to relax or to step back, they're probably not going to succeed. And clearly you knew that. You saw that early, I'm sure, when you jumped to the United Way work. And let's talk about that. I would think United Way would be a fantastic way to see a community, given the broad spectrum of activity programs and funding. But you tell me, I guess, what did you take from that foray into nonprofit, particularly through United Way?
Well, I think for me, it was really a great transition. At that time, United Way was a pretty sizable organization, and really was, in fact, utilizing many of the same business practices that I was used to, some of which I described earlier. And so I felt like it would be, and it was a way for me to really leverage those things that I had some experience with. And then on the other side, just a great opportunity to learn. Previous to that transition, had been involved on the board and a few other organizations, but you really just don't have a real understanding of the challenges, opportunities, and the work of nonprofits in our community as much as an organization like United Way. So my transition to that organization was perfect, because I got to really, again, leverage those things that I had some skills and experience in, but also really learn about the nonprofit organizations in our community. And that was my role. My role was initially supporting all of those nonprofits and leading a team that supported the grant process.
It sounds like you obviously grew in your appreciation for the nonprofit community. Not that you didn't already have it, but anything surprise you, I guess, once you now were able to be on the inside working with nonprofits?
So I mentioned earlier, some of us, I'll put myself in that camp, that have some assumptions about nonprofits. So It wasn't to the degree that I shared earlier, where I thought I was, making a transition, pre-retirement kind of thing. That wasn't
Right.
it. For
Right.
me, it was purpose driven. At the same time, I did not have a full appreciation of the level of agility, flexibility, resilience, and creativity that our nonprofit colleagues have and demonstrate every day as a way to run these businesses and achieve the impact that that they're trying to, in terms of supporting individuals, families in our community. So that was certainly was eye-opening for me.
Yeah, and I'm glad you lifted up, because you and I both have lots of colleagues that, and I hearken back to your great quote of a few minutes ago. It's just a tax designation, right? But the complexity of the businesses these nonprofit leaders are running is, perhaps just as complex as anything in the for-profit world, with less resources to do it. And sounds like you got a great orientation to exactly that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And as I mentioned, it was almost nothing's perfect, but it was a really great transition, for me, and lots of learnings that I've been able to appreciate even more today than maybe I realized at the time.
Well, and I was going to ask you about that as you look back on that positive experience. Obviously, the kind of federated organizations like United Way or arts federations like ASC are struggling. Workplace giving is perhaps in decline, and I wonder what you see as the future for organizations like that. I guess, are they going to have to pivot into new types of structures or approaches, or how would you kind of reflect back on organizations like the good work you did through United Way?
Yeah, I actually, that's been an opportunity for a long time, and I'll just give you a little bit of context as it relates to my United Way experience. So I was with United Way for a little more than 3 years, and the first year was just absolutely fantastic. But this United Way, as you know, and many others do, had some challenges back in the late 2000s. There was a scandal involving the CEO and the board, and at the same time, or just subsequent to that, we had a big recession. And so the combination of the result of those issues, and the community's trust waning for a period of time,
Right.
and the recession, that in my mind really began what you just described we're still dealing with today.
Right.
Which is, there's been a shift in corporate giving, or in the way that corporations engage their team members to give. Individuals are giving differently. And so even back then, we were talking about the need to shift to more of what is the value add on the impact side of things. What are the things that a United Way, as an example, can uniquely bring to the table in terms of convening and other techniques, collective impact, for example. The fund development is hugely important, because those local nonprofits, that's a big way for them to be funded. But
Right.
It's these other things that are becoming even more important today than they were then. And so that's not a new phenomenon. It's just something that I think has been elevated in recent years.
Yeah, and that's a good description. And it unfortunate here in the Charlotte region, for our listeners outside, that there was that combination of economic conditions, scandal, if you will, or certainly some media scrutiny that created problems. But hopefully these organizations will find ways to continue to engage, because, as you know, Chris, better than any, the public doesn't often know about some of those sectors within the nonprofit community that are serving populations that perhaps are very much in need, but the awareness level's fairly low.
Yeah, I think that's right. I also think that we have, and when I say we, kind of the nonprofit sector, and me personally for sure, and us at Goodwill, in more recent years, much more of an appreciation for the need to be more focused on neighborhoods and communities, and to be co-creating solutions.
Right.
One of the, I was talking about a shift that we've had here, and not unique to Goodwill, which is, we don't have the answers, nor should we. And
Right.
moving from that more like, here's what you need to do because we know best, which has never been, really the best way. But at least an acknowledgement of that. And no, we're here to partner and support and co-create. And so I think if you look at what's happening now, there's much more of a focus on that, and that needs to continue. Absolutely needs to continue.
Yeah, I love that. And again, obviously you brought it to your current leadership, that perspective, and we'll talk more about it. Let me ask you though, from a career planning perspective, again, a lot of listeners are pondering, they're kind of climbing the ladder in nonprofit leadership. So you had a good experience at United Way. Tell me about though, how you first assessed the opportunity to join Goodwill.
With Goodwill. Okay. Well, so, I mentioned earlier, my life experience as somebody who, had some challenges when I was a young man. I didn't initially finish high school, go back and get my GED, didn't initially finish my first go round at college.
Right.
And really understanding the power and feeling, feeling the power of being in an organization and surrounded by people that didn't place a judgment on me for those things, that really helped provide opportunities and access. When I learned about Goodwill, which I learned about Goodwill from my time at United Way. I didn't know much about Goodwill,
right,
until I was in that role, and that is what this organization's about. Again, we weren't necessarily talking about it at that point, but it was about access. It was about opportunities and possibilities, and not placing judgment on others. And when I found out about at the core what this organization was about, I said to myself, that is where I want to be. I don't really care what role it is.
Right.
To be quite honest with you, I at that point, there was not an aspiration to be leading the organization. There was just a connection to the purpose at its core of the organization. And so I pretty early on realized this was where I wanted to be, and just, began to share that was something I'd be interested in. And one thing led to another, and had an opportunity to join the organization. It's been a little over 10 years now.
I love that. And frankly, not many have the opportunity to have such a personal mission connection. I love how you're continuing to pay it forward now through your organization. You're helping many young Chris Jacksons, aren't you? And I guess, did you have help back in those difficult days of high school and college? Were there organizations that were helpful to you, or is it perhaps because you didn't have the help you maybe needed that now you're so driven to help others through Goodwill at this day?
Yeah, I didn't really, not in high school or in college. When that really started happening was at this organization, this financial services firm that I spent so long at. And it's, people don't often think about large corporate organizations having that kind of environment, but this one did. And then subsequent to that, I certainly had individuals who are, I'd consider mentors. I also had, I know I had people who were looking out for me that I didn't even know were looking out for me.
Right.
So it happened a little later in life for me. But the power of it is what really I'm trying to share, which is I know what it's like to have that environment in whatever way that is manifested. It's just, you can really achieve anything if you have that kind of support.
Well, let me ask you this, Chris, for our listeners, that maybe somewhere not close to a Goodwill, or even our international listeners, maybe give us your elevator speech. What exactly is Goodwill? What are you trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I mean, again, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is help people prosper as defined by them. So what is it that is going to allow an individual and their family to really thrive? And our role in that is to help them navigate their road to that. And we focus on helping people build skills in specific areas that will help them from a career perspective. We help them figure out how to remove obstacles and get over challenges that may be getting in their way. And we help them build, the capital and the network and the relationships that will help them achieve whatever that goal is, over time. And we talk about family sustaining employment based on your goals. What does that look like? And let us partner with you to help you achieve that.
And of course, for those here in this community, your Goodwill Opportunity Campus is such a fantastic illustration of what I would describe as the wraparound services you provide everyone you serve through your programs and activities and kind of mentor training and all that. And you came to the organization, Chris, and I think immediately had an impact through strategic leadership opportunities. Did you, and I guess you came to an organization that by all external measure was certainly successful, but it sounds to me like you quickly began to see opportunities to get even better. So I wonder, maybe speak to that as you arrived and then ultimately, of course, became the CEO in 2017.
Yeah, I think that I had just a wonderful opportunity as I joined the organization. And that's because my role was actually to facilitate the strategic planning process and think about, the systems of the organization from an organizational development standpoint. But the strategic planning process allowed me the opportunity to hear the voices of all of our different constituents and stakeholders from, our team, my colleagues, our board, leadership, members of the community. And I was able to help pull that together in a way and share it in a way with our leadership and board so that they could begin to think and we could begin to think about what needed to change. Because you are right. I mean, this organization at that point had been around for 45 years or so. It helped tens of thousands of people, a great community resource. And so it was more about how to elevate that work. One of my favorite books is Good to Great. And back then I was talking about art. Maybe we're great. If folks think we're great, that's fantastic. But how do we be amazing? Right? So how do we go from great to amazing? It was just, how do we elevate? And so it really was from the voices of those different constituency groups that led to the strategic visioning that created this campus. And I tell people all the time, I still have the handwritten notes from one of the first strategy sessions that we had that describe the Opportunity Campus. I mean, people wrote a headline and folks wrote a story to go against that headline, and I have those notes.
Wow.
And every once in a while, I look back at them and say, wow, that the power of one, listening, and then two, being able to process that and say, well, what does that mean for us? And be able to see that actually come to fruition. It's been just amazing.
I love that. And I guess it would have been easy to kind of brush that off as, all right, that was a nice strategic dreaming session. But you must have sensed something quickly that there is opportunity here. And I wonder, though, Chris, how did you face some, I guess, complacency from some board members or leaders who are like, come on, Chris, everything's fine. Why are we pushing to get to amazing? How did you break through that, again, if there was any of that contentment that we're fine just as we are?
To be honest with you, I didn't really have too much of that, to be honest with you. And I think the reason is, back to what I was sharing in terms of process, we did, I did personally a lot of interviews, individual, group, and I think we created the environment where it was okay to think about things a little differently. Again, it wasn't a critical, like, what are we not doing right? It was more about, like, what can we do to really be amazing?
Nice.
And if you put, in my experience, if you put something out like that to people who care about what you do, in this case, our leadership team and our board, then it allows them to dream. And I think it, again, in my experience, you have a little less of the, like, why do we need to do anything differently? So I think that process allowed for that.
You rallied a positive spirit, didn't you? And
yeah,
with opportunity and potential, that's a great way, it would seem to me, to build a strategic visioning process. Let me ask you about that. Again, a lot of nonprofit leaders are going to, like you, have their new start at an organization. How long did it take, Chris, would you say, to do this process? And maybe what were the headlines? It sounds like there was a lot of listening, interviews, focus groups, or whatever, but maybe you could walk us through at a high level what the process was like.
Yeah, I will say, it wasn't a short process. I mean,
it took some time, didn't it?
It definitely took some time. And, so if you really started with, okay, we had a strategic plan in place at that time, and it had been in place for a while. So there was at least an acknowledgement that, it was time to look at the plan. Then the kind of, all right, so what's going to create the best environment? What kind of information do we need? And so beginning to collect that, the interviews that I spoke of, then holding, some strategy sessions with our board and leadership team, and then socializing some of what we came up with to see how that connected to those that we had asked the question early on. So, we used back then a pretty traditional planning process. And I think, all in all, it probably was a year. And then some of the shifts that resulted were very clear, actually. And they were things like, moving from transactional to relational, moving from a model of job placement to family sustaining employment, right?
Right.
Are some of the, there's a few others, but those were some of the bigger ones. And then using those shifts, and that's how we communicated them, as shifts, to say, okay, if these are the shifts that we all agree need to happen, what do we need to do, right? And then so the plan was built around that. And so that's how I would describe that process.
Yeah, I love that. And all right, but again, if I'm a nonprofit leader, you're telling me, Chris, I need to allow for a year. How would you realistically? Because I think sometimes, organizations are trying to speed things up. All right, well, let's just do this. Worst case would be like, let's do it over the weekend as a retreat and try to get it done. But I guess you're cautioning against rushing a process to do it right.
Yes, I would say if you really, right is depending on what's right for your organization. Where are you in your life cycle, your organization and its life cycle? How broad and deep do you need to go? We needed, a pretty significant, we needed something new. So for us, yes, if it's a little bit more of validating some things that you directionally, which you already have, that's going to take less time. And I will share, we have subsequently moved from kind of the more traditional planning process that I described, although some of the foundational elements are the same, to more of something that we call real-time planning, which just means, we've got strategic themes, we've got direction, we have goals that are multi-years. But the real time allows us to be more agile. So we're reviewing and shifting constantly, and not held to this is the plan and we just got to make sure we're executing on it. It's like, how does the plan change over time? So we've moved to that model over the last couple of years, which has been very helpful, particularly as a result of COVID.
I was going to ask you that. Yeah, talk about a chance to test your real-time planning structure, right? You had a pandemic to manage it. I guess, Chris, maybe elaborate a little bit more on what does that look like? Does that mean, instead of these long-range plans and you meet once a year, were these planning activities now more accelerated, more frequent? What did that look like, real-time?
Yeah, real time. Essentially, they're more frequent. Again, the foundational elements are the same in terms of getting feedback from your stakeholders and different constituent groups. Looking at using data to help inform kind of direction setting. I think the real and then coming up with I call them the big rocks in terms of what are the major themes. And how do you describe those themes as a guidepost, really guidepost? The real shift is we're looking at those things all the time. I mean, all of our metrics are related to those. In our organization, every quarter, we've got a focused discussion about what's happening, what shifts do we need to make. And so the real time, in part, is related to the frequency by which we're looking at those things and the willingness to make shifts.
Nice.
When they need to be made. And that could be stopping something.
Yeah.
Because you know as well as I do, sometimes the best strategy is to say no or to stop.
Right.
Or it could be starting something or making a shift. So yeah, it's really more the frequency of looking and the willingness to make adjustments. So we do have 4 or 5 year goals. Those goals today look a little different than they did when we created the plan 2 years ago because we've made shifts, right? And
you continue to look at it literally on a quarterly, if not more frequent basis, so you can make real-time adjustments.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, I love that. And I do want to go back to, again, the headline that you articulate so well, this strategic visioning, which at Goodwill, you saw it manifest itself in this beautiful opportunity campus. But how'd you do that, Chris? And let me ask you the question. A lot of organizations have fun visioning exercises, retreats, and all that. But you took it from vision to reality. What were the keys to making it happen?
Yeah, I think for us, and as I reflect back, I think having our leadership, both staff leadership and board leadership, involved from the very beginning,
right,
created an ownership, right, a strong personal connection to each of those individuals and then those teams collectively. It wasn't a vision that was cast on by one person or even just a few people. This was a vision that was cast by a team of folks who came together. So to me, that's number one,
right?
Because once there's that level of connection to something, there's an automatic, like, I'm going to do everything in my power to help make this happen. And so that
it wasn't just top down, right, Chris? It wasn't like it wasn't like you were pushing this by yourself top down. You had the whole team engaged.
Yeah. And I think of course now, just to be fully transparent, I was not leading the organization at that time. I was part of the leadership team. I led the planning process. But we had a wonderful leader at that point who was, just as much as everybody else, engaged, supportive, and willing to do whatever it took to make it happen. So one thing I'll add here, Patton, is that, we all lead differently. So I'll just share my, how I lead. I often, particularly when I had the opportunity to step into this role, Chris, what's your vision? Chris, what's your vision? Where do you want us to go?
Right.
I will help us get there, but I want to hear from you. And that's I do that too, right?
Great
but
point.
The thing that I have found to be most helpful is that it's not about my vision. I can certainly articulate what I believe, which I did, what I hope for, which I did, but the power of the strategic visioning that we've been talking about is it's the collective. So as a leader, thinking about how to organize, what kind of information do we share that helps us come to that collective vision that's going to help us, be the most impactful organization we can be. So I just share that from my personal experience.
Love that. And that's such an interesting and important, I think, distinction that you're right. I wonder if a lot of nonprofit leaders expect that, or they feel the pressure that I have to articulate our vision. And it sounds like, Chris, you made it collective from the get-go. You're going to be the spokesperson, right? But you very much want everyone's insight and contribution to what that vision is.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's to your question about how things like the Goodwill Opportunity Campus come together. That's how they come together.
Yeah, excellent. It's a team sport. You helped coach, or you were on the staff and became the head coach, but you made it a team sport. And in fact, speaking of the team, you've been very good about developing the relationship with your board. And I wonder if you could speak to what are the keys in your mind to effective kind of CEO board relations.
Couldn't understate the importance of strong relationships with the board, collectively and individually. And I'll just start with that.
Yep.
The foundation for me is relationships. That's, in every other part of our lives, that's how we build trust. That's how we, are able to see commonalities. That's where we're able to see differences and learn from one another. So I start with the foundation. It's even before somebody's part of the board. It's, do we have a relationship? Do we know one another? How well do we know one another? Are we connected to the same things? Are we going to be able to challenge each other to get better? So I'll start with that. And then I think you have to be very, very intentional about engagement. And I'm using engagement in the broader sense.
Okay.
Because I think, once you find folks who are connected to the purpose, mission of the organization, which to me is number one, then secondly is, they're going to want to be engaged. They're going to want to be able to know that they're adding value, and you can't assume that that's happening. You've got to ask questions. You've got to adjust, the way you share information, and make sure that you're sharing information that allows them to connect in the way that I'm describing. You have to make sure you know their interests and find a way to connect their interests with the needs of the organization. And I think if you do those things, you get a board who is very supportive, will ask really tough questions, but will ask those questions from a point of view which is understanding, so that they can be helpful to help work through whatever business problem or opportunity you have.
Yeah, I'm struck by several good points there, but clearly you look at your board as not just a collective, but as individuals. Are you very proactive in making sure that you have one-on-ones with each board member? Again, I guess I'm thinking if there's a new executive director in our audience, has that been your kind of style to make sure you get to know them literally one by one?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. One-on-one, and I try to continue that, during their board engagement. I try to meet individually with every board meeting, every board member on some consistent basis. And so that's where your relationships are strengthened, and you hear some of the things I'm talking about that you might not hear, in other places. The other thing we do on the board engagement side is, again, I have a responsibility as, the CEO of the organization. But the only way that this organization, can run effectively is by, that leadership from the board, but the leadership from the staff. And so, not just our senior team, actually, a level of management that we have attend board meetings. They are encouraged to meet individually with board members as well. to again
Interesting.
build those relationships, and some of the insight that is gained through not just my meetings but others' meetings with board members helps inform the engagement that I described.
I could not applaud that more, and I cringe, and I know you've seen it too, but I've heard executive directors tell me that, no, I'm the only one that, goes to the board meetings. I'm the only one that interacts with the board members. And I just think that's a missed opportunity. And it sounds like, again, you're building and gaining from the collective intelligence from your team, also interacting with board leaders.
Yeah, and there's other benefits to it as well. It helps with the development of the team.
Yes,
And
indeed.
so yeah, so I think there's others that we could talk about too. But so anyway, that's my approach. It's my approach because I've seen and felt the power of it.
Chris, you advocate for culture, and you've in fact continued to build on the culture at Goodwill with your team throughout the organization. All right, but what is that good culture that you have identified, and how do you make it better?
That's a great question. So how I would describe our culture is, one, everybody in this organization is connected to a common purpose, right? That I described earlier. I think let's just start there, because that allows folks to really connect and understand, like, what I'm doing. There are things that are important to me. I want to have an environment where I'm learning and thriving, and all the things we aspire, which is always a continuous improvement opportunity, right? But I see the thing that's bigger than just me. So that allows me to interact differently, to listen differently. So let's just start with that. I think we've got a strong spirit of collaboration, both internally and externally. One of the things I talk about, all the time is we have so many resources in this community. We're actually not lacking from resources, in my opinion.
Right. Right.
They're just not all connected and aligned as well as maybe they could be. And so collaboration is another aspect I would share. And I think I'll just call it, a desire to be the best in terms of creating and supporting and being as impactful as we can be. So that's everything from being willing to look at things that maybe aren't as they should be, and willing to make changes. And I think being innovative and creative and just thinking outside the box would be another aspect that I would share.
Yeah, I love that. Did you articulate those kind of core values, I suppose, right? And that you, by stating it, and I would bet if I talked to your leadership team, they would probably all echo a similar vocabulary, which helps you create the culture, right? There's more than just those words, but it's embodied in those activities. I'm guessing, Chris, that strongly influences your thought process when you hire somebody. Is there any kind of go-to criteria you're especially looking for when you're hiring, particularly at the leadership level?
Yeah, there is. And I do want to add to something that you just said, which is, well, one, I would certainly hope that if you talk to anybody in our organization, they may not use exactly the same words that I use, but the spirit of their words. The spirit of it would be the same. That's one. And the second thing is, my view on culture is we are, as leaders, responsible for creating the environment that lets those things that will most allow us to move forward our purpose, our mission, however you want to describe it, because you can't dictate culture, right? I mean, I can describe something, that doesn't mean that's actually what's happening. And so it's about are you creating the environment that allows those real positive things to to happen. So how I described it, those are things that are happening because I think hopefully we're creating that environment. And so when I'm thinking about talent, I always, again, I'm gonna go back to I've been hopefully pretty consistent. I start with the foundation. The foundation is like, are you connected to the purpose of this organization? And is that clear? Because particularly at senior level, there are, or really any level, but since you asked me about senior level,
Sure.
There are so many talented people, and a lot of people could do the job,
Right.
in terms of their specific skills, their specific experience. To me, it's the strength of the connection to the purpose and also the how they go about doing their work that is most important to me in terms of being able to elevate our work.
Yeah,
that's what I look at.
It's a great distinction, and you said it well, because a lot of people might have the requisite skills, right? But there's that nuance of how they do it, and of course how they would fit in. And you've worked too hard to build the culture you have, and I'm sure you want to protect that with the right kind of people that will join. Chris, fantastic advice across the board in all elements of nonprofit leadership. Having been on the journey, and I don't want to talk about it like you're done. You got a lot more to do, right? So I want you to keep going. But as you look now at this journey you've been on, I guess, how would you advise someone else who might come to you and literally say, Chris, I'm thinking about nonprofit leadership? What would you advise them?
I would start with one, think critically about why you're interested in nonprofit leadership.
Good point.
What is it that would just start with that, like, and talk to some folks who may challenge you in a good way about how to think about that, so that at the core, it's the right decision. Then secondly, I would say, if you're not already, become as educated about what you're thinking about as possible. Just
Right.
like anything else that you would do, you're going to go and you're going to talk to people and you're going to do your research and you're going to challenge yourself. Some of the assumptions that we described earlier, and then thirdly, while you're doing that, once you're sure that that's what it is, make sure folks know that that's something you're interested in, and be willing to maybe take an opportunity that isn't the one that you first thought that you're interested in, because there's many paths and there's no direct path.
That's so good.
There are many paths, and sometimes it's the one that you least expected that's going to give you, it's going to connect to your purpose much more strongly than maybe you even envisioned, and give you the knowledge that will help you and ultimately get to where you want to be.
It's wonderful, Chris. Fantastic advice, added to great ideas and resources and thought processes. So I'm delighted and grateful for your time. For our listeners, if I can ask for one more parting gift, as you know, I ask every guest to identify maybe a book that's been meaningful to you, or one you might recommend to someone kind of on this professional journey.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you three. I'm gonna start with the first one that came to mind.
Good.
It's been around for a long time. It's called "It's Your Ship: Management Techniques from the Best Damn Ship in the Navy." That's literally the title.
I love that. I got it on the shelf behind me. Good for you.
Oh, do you? Okay, you love that.
Love it.
All right,
yes,
so that's
yes.
all about people. That's all about engagement of your team. It's all about. It's a absolutely. If you're in leadership or interested in leadership, let's start with that one. The other two is Good to Great, which I alluded to earlier, and there's a subsequent to that, which is Good to Great for the social sectors.
Yes, indeed.
And then the third one's a more recent one I read a few years ago, and I actually still have it right here because I use it often. It's called Blue Ocean Strategy.
Yes, sir.
And those are my top three.
Fantastic. Hey, everybody needs some summer reading, right, Chris? So they could add any of these to their list and not be bad off. Chris, where can people find out more about you and the great work you're doing at Goodwill?
The best way to learn about us, get connected with us is our website, which is goodwillsp.org. Again, goodwillsp.org. All the information about our organization, about the services that we offer, our leadership team, our board, all of that is on the website. And there's many different ways to connect with us directly. And of course, you can follow us on social media as well. But would love to hear from anybody who might be interested in learning more.
Fantastic. Chris, thank you again for joining me on the path.
It was my pleasure. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Chris as much as I did and came away with some practical ideas that can guide your professional journey and help you be a more effective and visionary nonprofit leader. Don't forget about the show notes. They are available on our website, pattonmcdowell.com, where you can find out more about Chris, all of the services and programs Goodwill offers to its communities, and, of course, more of the resources Chris and I discussed. As always, please share this episode with someone else on the path. And if you haven't already, you can subscribe. Just go to the podcast page at pattonmcdowell.com, and you'll see links to Apple, Spotify, and all of the primary podcast platforms. Don't miss out on any of our weekly episodes. They come out every Thursday, as well as bonus features we're producing at least once a month. Thanks again for all you're doing in the nonprofit sector, especially right now. And keep up the good work for causes that are most meaningful to you. I'll keep bringing you content that can help you do it even better. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time on The Path.